Nixon here, and it is New Year's Day, and we're going to talk about who's really at war here. There's a war going on. There's people that have called this a version of World War III, but we're going to talk about who is really at war. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. So let's talk about who is really at war. I think this is an interesting conversation. Probably going to be a fairly lonely one on, on New Year's Day because I'm so everybody's doing their things. But I got the few things I needed to get done, and I figured I'll make a video. And this was something that was I was thinking about anyway. So maybe people will watch it, sometime in the future. I hope everybody's enjoying themselves. Those of us who are in the parts of the world that see this as the new year, as the new year, that celebrate New Year's Eve, day, whatever the hell it is, you get my point. Let's get to what we're talking about. Okay. It is clear. It has been stated by Vladimir Putin. It has been stated by President Biden and his people that this is not just about Ukraine, that there's much bigger things going on here. Recently, Lindsey Graham said, and some of the Republicans, I believe it was Mitch McConnell, said this is about cold, hard American interest. Cold, and even that, when he implied cold, what does that mean? It means heartless. It means this is not about people, whatever, American, that it's about very selfish interest for the U.S. empire. Right? And very narrow interest. So let's talk about who's on each side. Let's start with the American side. Now, immediately people would say, I hate when pundits say that. People say what that really means is I'm saying it, but I don't want to take responsibility for it. So instead of saying people say, I'll just go with this is the way I see it. The masses in the West see this as the United States and its allies. I call them colonies. I call them countries that are part of the U.S. empire that have no independence and sovereignty. That's the way I see it, being dragged along. But however you see it, we've got the U.S., we've got Europe, we've got the U.K. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, we'll include the U.K. with Europe, even though it's not part of the EU. Europe, including U.K. We've got Australia, we've got Canada. And then we've got a few countries here and there that are kind of under the U.S. control, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, you know what I mean? These are countries that in Asia that don't really have their own independence, in that, such as South Korea, it's written in their constitution in South Korea that in times of war, the United States takes control of their military. If that's the case, you don't have control. Back in 1980, you don't have control of your country. You don't have sovereignty if somebody else takes control of your military during times of war. South Korea doesn't have sovereignty. The U.S. decides what happens there. Same with Japan. Japan has no sovereignty. They're wholly occupied by U.S. bases. Recently, they passed this gigantic, they said, we're going to do all this gigantic military spending. And when you look at it, a big part of it is paying for the bases. A big part of their military spending is paying for the U.S. bases there. And then, of course, they're going to buy all this military equipment from the U.S. So the U.S. is just extracting money from Japan like it does with all of its colonies, right? So what do you have? You have the U.S. empire. You have the U.S. and the countries that the U.S. has complete control over and are occupied by U.S. bases. Now, here's the question that's important. If one side of this conflict is the U.S. empire, the U.S. and its colonies and the countries that it completely occupies that have no independence, right? Then are the people on board? I mean, that's a question people don't ask. They just say the U.S. But the question is this, are the people on board? Here's what I believe. If you look at what has happened as far as propaganda, as far as the news, as far as social media and big tech trying to effectively shutting down any dissenting and dissident and anti-war and anti-imperialist voices. The people who say, I don't agree with this, those are the ones who have to be shut down. Perfect example is me, right? A lot of people know I have a show on Sputnik. I also have a show two Pacifica shows, one in Washington, D.C. on WPFW, another one in Los Angeles, California on 90.7 KPFK, two large and powerful radio stations, right? There is a guy on one of the stations on my show is popular, but there's a guy on the KPFK, Brad Friedman. I mention his name only because his whole thing is to shut me down. Garland shouldn't be here. He's a puppet propagandist stooge, blah, 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 right? So there is I say that to say this. If you are a person who is dissenting against war, you're dissident against this war, the mechanisms of the U.S. on all levels are going to try to shut that voice down. Why is that? And why am I adding that into a conversation about who's on board here? Because when you talk about a war, a country going to war, the question has to be, who is leading this? Are the people on board? Are the people like, yes, we've got to go after this group here or this country, whatever, and stop them and attack them or whatever we have to do? Or are they being dragged into a conflict by the ruling elite class? I would argue part of the evidence that it is in fact the ruling elite that's dragging, that's the impetus, that is the engine for this conflict. Part of the obvious, to me, evidence of that is the level of censorship. You see, if the people were on board and if the ruling elite class was open about this Ukraine conflict, they could, in fact, allow a healthy discussion. If they were acting on behalf of the people, they would invite a healthy discussion by the American people, and they'd say, look, it's in your best interest. Here's why. Go ahead and have a healthy discussion about it, because they'd be acting on the interest of the American people, knowing that a discussion of that would bear out that most people were behind them. The fact that there's so much censorship, the fact that there's people going after dissenters, right, like me, saying you got to shut down. You can't allow this guy to get on the radio and say the same things that he's saying, even though they're true. Even though I can't dispute what he's saying, you can't allow him on there. You can't allow these people on Twitter, Facebook, and social media, etc., on mainstream news. Look what the mainstream news have done. People who used to be allowed on mainstream news, Glenn Greenwald, people like that who were regulars on mainstream news, they can't get on mainstream news other than Tucker Carlson now. Why is that? Because here's my point. This is the position I'm taking. This is a war. This is a conflict initiated by and for the ruling elite class to maintain their status as the ruling elite class, not only over the United States, but in their view, over the entire world. So they cannot afford the average schmucks, that's you and I, to have that discussion, because if we have that discussion, it will bear out that they are in the minority pushing this conflict, and the truth will come out. They have to lie to us. We can't know the truth. We have to think that Vladimir Putin has cancer. He's got Parkinson's disease, he's stomach cancer, brain cancer, he's got a scurvy, turf toe, hoof and mouth disease. We got to think that he's sick, all that. We got to believe that he's a dictator. Oh, he's a dictator. Why? Because if we have a discussion, just like Assad's a dictator and Maduro's a dictator and Putin's a dictator and Xi's a dictator, that every country that the United States opposes, they have to convince their people this person's a dictator and that person's not acting on the interest of the people in that country. That's the game. And if you allow people to have a discussion, an honest and open discussion, the truth may come out. So my point is this: part of the evidence that I have I submit part of the evidence that I have that this is a war of, by, and for the ruling elite class. The part of that evidence I submit is the censorship of those of us who would dissent, and the censorship of an open, free, and honest conversation amongst the people of the country. They have to be shut down. Look at Europe. They're shutting down any outlets who would argue that, who would make an opposing dissenting voice. People who go and cover, literally like Germans who go and they cover the conflict and they say things that it doesn't matter, they believe to be honest, things that they can validate, things that they can substantiate using empirical evidence and data. they're afraid to go back to Germany because they're going to be thrown in jail. I mean, we've seen that from Germany before. I think I remember that happening in Germany at some point before, and it's back. Why? Because the actions of the US empire, because the actions of the American side in this conflict are for the benefit of the ruling elite class, not for the benefit of the people. Here's another example. If it was before the benefit of the people, why would the people in Europe be hungry? Why would we have all of these inflation going up, all these other things are going up, things, they're running out of fuel, the industry, Europe is being deindustrialized, the United States is literally stealing the industries from Europe and bringing it to the US, and now the Europeans are suffering. The Europeans are they're cold, dark, and hungry, right? If this conflict was on their behalf, wouldn't they be for it? Wouldn't they be doing better? In fact, there are Europeans, many Europeans in the streets now that are protesting. That is being hidden. The mainstream media isn't covering it because they can't cover it. Because then people will figure out, wait a minute, why would I support this war? The ruling elite class wants it. Same with China. Why is the U.S. going after China? If you listen and you read, they'll tell you clearly. Tony Blinken will say, they're the only country in the world that can challenge the United States supremacy. He came out and said it. The status quo, they can challenge the status quo. Not that China is doing anything other than becoming the same with Russia, other than becoming wealthier, more powerful, and a more powerful military. That's what they're doing, as any country would do. But the U.S. ruling elite class say, holy moly, we want to rule the world. And these people are getting strong enough to stop us. We've got to confront them. We've got to drag our working class into conflict with these people to maintain our hegemonic, our selfish desires to rule the world. So on all that, I say all that to say one thing. On one side, you've got the ruling elite of the U.S. empire. That includes the UK. And to be quite frank, the European ruling elite are on and off. You got some of the European ruling elite that are very uncomfortable right now, the French and Germans, but they're on board because they're occupied. They have no say. As recently we heard, I heard recently in an interview with Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, and he said he's talked to members of he didn't state it like this, but leaders, but members of the ruling elite class in Europe. He's talked to them and he said, why are you doing this? You're killing yourselves. And they said, we have no say. We have no say. In other words, so they're acting on behalf of the ruling elite class because they don't have sovereignty and independence. Their people have to suffer, right? So on one side, it's clear. One side of this conflict is the U.S. ruling elite. Now, let's also look at what's happening. Look at the United States and tell me what's going on. I had a friend of mine recently who went to Northern California. He's from Northern California, hasn't been there in a long time. He came back and he was shocked. He was clearly shaken. Up above Frisco, Oakland, that area, the homelessness, the crime, the things that he saw when he left. He never saw such a thing. You know, side streets where there's lines of cars and RVs and things like that, where people are living in them. America's turning into a third world country, right? Places that he used to go to eat that he said, I can't go now because the people told me if you go there, by the time you go in and order your food, your car will be stolen. He had a decent, he was in town. He had a rental car. No, I'm sorry. Your car is too new and shiny. You go in there, they're going to steal your car before you get your omelet, right? He wasn't accustomed to that. You look at America, homeless tent cities, all kinds of stuff all over the place, right? It is a disaster area. I was in DC. My office is on K Street, right around the corner from the White House. And the other station, thankfully for me, is 4 blocks up K Street, WPFW. The Pacifica station. So I'm walking up and down K Street doing one show or another. So I come back and I'm like, well, let me walk down to, there's a little place called The Park, right? It's a little restaurant, bar, club, whatever. It's very, not little, it's very, very nice, very, very elegant. So I went there. And as I'm walking, when you walk through that area in DC, there are little squares where there'll be all 4 streets and there's a square in the middle and there's grass there. So it's a little park. Man, I'm walking by these things. They are full of tents. One of them, I bet, I didn't count, but I bet there was 25 tents. In one little square park, there wasn't much room. This was a homeless encampment, and this was 15th. So it was 2 blocks from the White House. It was a gigantic Homeless encampment. They're starting to turn the little squares of grass in Washington, D.C. into homeless encampments. The people in the U.S. are struggling and suffering. The prices are going up. So the U.S. is the empire. It's obvious. It's collapsing. The so-called allies in Europe, the U.S. grip on them is, tenuous at best. The people are like, we want out. We're getting screwed. The American people are looking at their leader saying, what the hell is going on here? And the best we can get is, here's a blue and yellow flag. Yay, I stand behind Ukraine. A lot of people are starting to question the money that's going to Ukraine right now. People are like, my God, we got people here struggling and suffering in this supposedly rich country. And all this money's going there, which of course you and I already know it's a scam. It's not going to Ukraine. It's a scam. Like FTX crypto, right? It's going to Zelensky, and he's going to invest in crypto because that's going to stand up against the Ruskies. So, but at any rate, so my point being, we got an empire that's economically collapsing. It is going down, down, down. And one of the things is simply the amount of money going to the Pentagon. When you got $850 roughly billion going to the war machine, when in August they just passed a $250 billion bill called the Countering China Act, when 1 year ago they passed a $280 billion bill in Congress called the Countering China Act. So that's 250 in 1 year, 280. That's $530 billion in 1 year. Oh, over and above the 850 billion that they just passed last week. And then another 100 billion for Ukraine. And then we haven't even started with the intelligence community, right? So why is the United States collapsing? Because it's got a big fist. It's an impoverished country with a great big fist. We got a big military, but the people are struggling and suffering. And the United States government now exists for war. That's one of the definitions. If you look, a guy named what's his name, Sheldon Wolin, who talks about I think he passed away, but he was brilliant. Please forgive me if he's still alive, but I don't think he is. But at any rate, he talked about inverted totalitarianism, wherein you had a totalitarianism, but rather than have a government or an individual figure, you had the corporations were the totalitarian leaders, right? A kind of a corporate totalitarianism. So we got a ruling elite oligarchical totalitarianism here, right? So all the money goes to the oligarchs, all the money goes to the war machine. All of the money that we have, they got a small group of people and they split that money against that small group of ruling elite. Just like when bank robbers rob a bank and there's 5 of them, 1 for me, 1 for you, 1 for you, 1 for you, 2 for me, 2 for you, 2 for you. That's the way the ruling elite in the West do the money from the people that they rule over. They don't represent, they rule over, right? So the empire economically, morally, culturally is collapsing. So we've got on one side, we have a collapsing empire, the US empire and its vassals. And the vassals are starting to wiggle a little bit saying, this is hurting. I don't know how much I like this, as are people all over. All right, let's move on. Who's on the other side? So we've got a collapsing empire. Who's on the other side? I mean, even people that disagree with me about the U.S., somebody tell me that the U.S. is getting better. Somebody tell me that they drive around. The crime is horrific, and what kills me, before I move, let me say this. Crime is bad, bad, bad here. It's bad. It's a lot of places that people, robbery, theft, you name it, right? Smash and grabs where they bust out windows. My buddy also told me that when he was in northern Cal, there was signs all over the place. Don't leave anything in your car unattended. Put everything in the trunk. Why smash and grabs? If people look in the window and see anything, they're going to bust your window open. They're going to steal your stuff. Now, let me ask you this. That wasn't happening, say, before COVID, was it? So does that mean that this is about bad people, about evil people? This is about the individuals that are committing the crime. A lot of people will never accept that there can be social. I used to have this discussion because I taught criminal justice. And I taught specifically this, right, about this. And that is, what are the reasons and causes of crime? I taught that, right? And when you have that discussion, there are people that say, well, it's just bad people, individuals, right? It's just the bad apples out here that commit crime. Well, then why is it that when the economy is going well and people are doing well, crime goes down? When the economy goes to hell, crime goes up. These are the same people. They're not different people. Don't get me wrong. I also used to say this, there's many reasons for crimes to happen as there are crimes. So there are, in fact, people that are criminally inclined for one reason or another. But in the aggregate, in the whole, as a society, when the economy goes to crap, crime goes up. There's a term, crimes of desperation, right? When people are hungry and struggling and what have you, they don't have jobs, they're going to be more likely to steal. Crimes of desperation. You watch Europe and what happens. Crimes going up in Europe. Anywhere that the economy goes to hell, crime's going to go up because there's crimes of desperation. Prostitution, oftentimes, unfortunately, sadly, is a crime of desperation. There are a lot of women in the United States that are prostitutes. A guy who was in law enforcement who taught this stuff, let me tell you, a lot of women that are prostitutes in the United States. You know why? A lot of them, young prostitutes, 18, 19 years old, you're a young girl and you're 8 years old, and your parents are thrown in jail, whatever, and you're put in foster homes, right? Guess what happens when you age out of the foster care system? You now are 18 years old and you're aged out of the foster care system. You're on the street and you had no family, you had nobody looking out for you, you had nobody pointing you in the right direction. You might have been sexually abused, whatever, right? And now you're 18 years old, and sometimes you got an 18-year-old girl who's very attractive. She's good looking, she's 18, and she's homeless on the street, aged out of the foster care system. Here's a toothbrush. This is the richest country in the world that does this to young girls. And you know what happens? Prostitution, strippers. Let me say this. I hate to admit it, but I'll admit it. We're all human beings. We're all adults here, right? We're all adults, and we can all look at our lives and look at our histories. And I'll add this, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, but what the hell, you're listening. When I was a young man in my 20s, right? I must be honest. There was a period in my life when I dated strippers. There was a period in my life when I dated. It was not unusual for me to date strippers. And I learned a lot from that. I really did, because you'd see these women and they were drop dead cute. I mean, just, make your tongue fall out of your mouth looking at them if you're a man, right? And then you meet them. Oh, wow, great. Hey, let's go on a date. And you find out that these are really screwed up and flawed people. Broken. Why? Because they came from terrible backgrounds. They came from abusive backgrounds, sexual abuse, blah, 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 blah. And when I met them, I'm just like, hey, this is a gorgeous woman, blah, blah, blah. And they were broken people. They often had weapons, could be physically dangerous. Trust me when I tell you that. But the bottom line was, again, the crime of prostitution. A lot of them had drug problems, things of that nature. Why is that? Because they came from poverty, desperation, foster. A lot of them. I'll say more often than not, the girls, when I was in my 20s, the strippers that I dated, more often, over 50%, maybe upwards of 70%, had been in the foster care system. They had at some point, I remember one girl telling me that when she was young, she had a brother and a sister, her father beat and abused them so bad. He was in the military. They lived in California. Beat and abused them so bad that the military took his kids from him and he went to jail. I mean, he would court-martialed him, put him in jail. He must have been abusing the hell out of his children. But she was a very broken person with a history of violence, shall we say, right? So my point is, but I was 20 some years old and she was gorgeous. I didn't, what the hell? I'm dating her. At that point, I was just a gigantic hormone pointing in one direction, right? I was a big hormone. I didn't know any better. But I'm glad I did that stuff. I survived it somehow because I learned. And one of the things I learned is, was she just a bad person? Was she just some evil criminal? No, there was a background there that had created a dynamic of desperation. She turns 18. She's drop dead gorgeous, and she's homeless. She's going to use, as Aretha Franklin said in her song, she's going to use what she got to get what she wants. And that's what it is. My point to all of this being, that's a reality story about Garland's history. I was young. Yeah, I was a guy. I was a 20-some-year-old guy. I was a police officer. Girls at that age, especially strippers, kind of get attracted to the uniform, stuff like that. And I was a human being, and I learned a lot from that. But one of the things I learned is, throughout my life, a lot of crime is crimes of desperation. And the crimes are going up in the US empire. And I've heard friends of mine who are in London say, man, you can't leave anything that ain't nailed down in London because it will be stolen. So my point, all of that goes to this. That's fun talking about that stuff and kind of sharing early parts of my life. But my point is what? That desperation creates crime. And the US empire is collapsing and the crime is only getting worse. And it ain't getting worse because suddenly people woke up and they were yesterday, I'm a great person. And then they woke up tomorrow and they're like, now I'm an evil criminal. I've been transformed by, I don't know, magic time. No, it's not about the individual criminal in most instances. It can be, but in the aggregate, an impoverished country that spends all its stinking money on war and shares all of the the loot amongst the ruling elite class are going to leave the people desperate, and there's going to be crime. Bottom line. I could go on and on and on because I thought that I could talk about the origins when the Italians and the Irish came over to the United States in 1800s, early 1900s, right? And what there was a lot of crime. Why? They were impoverished. They brought over cheap labor. They were the second wave of slaves. The first slaves, they just grabbed black folks and said they were going to be slaves. The second group of slaves, they grabbed Irish or whoever they could, people, and they brought them over here and they put them in factories working for nothing if they were lucky. In garment factories, you name it, working for nothing in New York and places north, and they abused and mistreated those people. But in their communities, there were a lot of crime because there were a bunch of poor people over here, many that didn't even speak the language. That was the dynamic that created crime. We have a different dynamic now, but all of it adds up to the same thing. The U.S. empire is collapsing. Collapsing. We got a collapsing empire. All of that was to substantiate my argument that the U.S. empire is collapsing. Now let's move on. And before I do, I got to say that somebody mentioned something about slavery, so I'll make another point about that. When I mentioned slavery, when I said the black folks were brought over there, they were just slaveries, and then they brought another wave of a different kind of slavery. You know, when Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a book in the 1800s called Uncle Tom's Cabin, you know, I love to study that area, the 1800s, around the time when slavery was going away in the U.S. in the Civil War, right? She wrote that book, and the South, the slave owners were furious. They were furious, right? And so actually, a lot of people in America don't know that. It actually started a new genre of books in the South that were pushback against Uncle Tom's Cabin. One of them was by a woman who actually was in a book club with Harriet Beecher Stowe. I can't remember her name. Scott? I don't remember. But at any rate, she wrote a book called The Northern Planter's Bride. The Northern Planter's Bride was one of the, interestingly enough, it was a book in which the Southern slave owners launched really the first really coherent and really straightforward attack on capitalism, on what they argued was this. I mean, some of it was pretty flawed, but it was that we've got these slaves and we treat them nice. They're poor little, infantile people. Their minds are weak, and we give them a place, and we do God's work. We give them a place to live, and we give them a hard, honest work, and we stand up for the slaves. The true reality of beating slaves and raping the women a lot wasn't exactly all of that, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. But what they said was, but you Northerners, you hypocrites, you take the people and you put them to work in these factories, and you exploit them, and you build the factory towns, and you know the story, right? So what's interesting is it was that battle won. There was a cultural discussion going on between the South and the North when it came to slavery, and when it came to the rise of industrialism, particularly in the North, and the abuse of labor. And isn't it interesting that the South, of all people, started off with an agrarian society with launching an attack on capitalism, but it was intended as a defensive attack, as a counterattack against Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. So interesting, just something to think about. Oh, which was okay. So let's move on. So we have substantiated something, I hope, if I didn't get too far away. We have substantiated that if somebody else says we are still slaves today, in a way, but not, well, slave is a way of my thinking. Slaves is a mindset. So we're not slaves. I put it like this. Some of us are, but you and I aren't. Who said we're still slaves today? Whoever that was, I'll say, you're not a slave. And let me find it. Red line or lick mine says we're still slaves today, slaves to consumerism. Yeah, I would say red line, people like us here today that are having this conversation, we're not slaves because our mind is not enslaved. There are people who, you know, who's slaves? The people run around with these stinking blue and yellow flags as their jobs go to hell out, as their lives fall apart, and they're running around with the blue and yellow flag doing what they're told. Those are the slaves, because slave is the issue of slavery is up here. The issue of slavery, the power of slavery is in the mind of the slaves. And once people realize they aren't slaves, they ain't slaves anymore. Let me give you another story before I go to the other side of that. Frederick Douglass. How did Frederick Douglass become such a fighter for slavery, right? When he was 8 years old. And this is, thank you, Red Line, another good story. What the hell? We got some time before I get to who's on the other side, some things you need to hear about the US. How did, and our mentality and the people like us, the people in the chat and us who push back against this stuff. Frederick Douglass was about 8 years old, I believe. And there was a slave, I forgot his name. The guy was sitting there. He had been given a bunch of work to do, and he's finished, and he did all of his work, and it was 11 a.m., and he sat down, and he was going to take a rest on a stool. And, of course, one of the slave drivers, we'll call him, came in and said to the guy, "Get up, you lazy so-and-so." And the guy said, "Look, the slavery, they gave me all of these jobs to do, and I did everything. I worked real hard so I could get finished. It's hot. I want to take a couple minutes to rest." And the slave driver, I ought to beat you, within an inch of your life. No, you're going to start working again, right? The guy said no. He says, "Well, I'm going to go get whoever the owner of the plantation is." They come back. The guy runs out he's very tall. He runs out into the river into kind of deep water, right? And so the slave master and his assistant can't get to the guy. So slave master gets his musket. He says, "Come back in here right now. I'm going to whip you." And the guy says, "I'm not doing it." He says, "I finished my work. I'm not coming in." Right? Not going to do it. "If you don't, I'll shoot you." Points the gun at him. "I'm going to count to 5. I will shoot you if you don't come in." And Frederick Douglass was one of the slaves that are watching. And it's important for us to all hear this, knowing the blue and yellow flag wavers that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. Points the gun at the guy. It says, "I'm counting to 5. You don't come in, I'm shooting you." The guy says, "I ain't coming in. Not happening. I'm not going to happen, buddy." Right? He points it. He counts 5, 4, 3. Boom! At 3, he shoots him, kills the guy. Right? But that was the first time Frederick Douglass had ever seen someone that wasn't a slave, because once the guy said what Gandhi said, what he saw is what Gandhi said, right? What they say about Gandhi, "Oh, we'll do this or we'll do that." Well, he was in court. Gandhi said, "By your laws, I'm guilty, and you should give me the harshest possible penalty. According to your laws, I don't believe in your laws, but according to your laws, I'm guilty and should get the hardest possible penalty." Right? And so whatever you do, you can kill me if you want to, but you can't make me do what you want. That's what that guy said. "I'm not your slave, buddy. Sure, you got a gun, you can kill me. I'll die. I'm not sure I'm going to go sooner or later, whatever. Might as well be now, but I'm not going to die a slave. You ain't telling me what to do. I'm willing to die." That's what this guy did. That's what Frederick Douglass saw. That's what drove Frederick Douglass to what he ultimately became, to learn to read, to escape, to be a brilliant orator, and a man who's got statues all over the world. And his name is known as a man who stood for justice and stood against the U.S. empire, right? So the bottom line, I say all that. Thank you, Red Line, for saying this. We're not slaves. Not the people in this chat, not the people on this channel, not the people who are involved in alternative media. We ain't slaves because our mind is free. We may be in an empire. We may be in a country where the ruling elite act in a manner that we don't agree with. But they're not going to shut us up. They're not going to censor us. They're not going to stop us from saying what we believe. And that's what's important. I want to thank everybody on this channel who comes here and who watches this stuff. And the other, Brian Berletic's channel and everybody, the Duran or Jimmy Dore or whoever the hell you watch. redacted, whoever you watch. You ain't watching CNN, MSNBC, BBC, and Fox. You are not a slave. Your mind is free. And you know what? Like we said, they could take any of us out tomorrow and hang us. But they can't force us to do anything that we don't want to do. If they hang us, they got to do something with our body. But the people like us, we're here today having this discussion, watching this stuff, listening, being part of this conversation because we're not slaves and we refuse to be slaves and we refuse to be sheep. I Earl Grey. Yeah, that's another one. There's so many. There's Scott Ritter, my buddy. I could go on and on. Ray McGovern. I mean, you name it, right? So many wonderful people. But here's the key: we're not slaves. Nope. Red line. You ain't a slave. You have enough sense to say that. You got enough knowledge. You got enough guts to say, oh, no, hell no. You didn't make me do what I don't want to do. You're not making me, and I'm not getting your stinking blue and yellow flag. Right? Therefore, we are not slaves. You can be proud and keep up what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Thanks a lot for that, red line. That was I'm glad you said that. That was really the impetus for a great conversation. Red line said something else. I just saw him. Red line or lick mine says, I'm damn sure not a slave. That's right. You're not. You wouldn't say that if you were a slave. You wouldn't say that if you're a slave. Right? A lot of people, oh crap, I forgot my banner. There we go. There are a lot of people who are angry and they know they're being oppressed by the ruling elite, but they're just not going to stand and put up for it. And they're not going to turn on whatever this stinking this chewing gum for the mind that they call news now and be taken for a ride. So that's a great conversation. I'm glad we had it. Now let's go to the other side, right? So we've got a collapsing ruling elite class, collapsing because the economy is being abused and they're taking all the money and they're splitting it amongst each other. Collapsing because people like us are waking up. People like us are waking up. Every day, more and more people are waking up. Isn't that awesome? That's what's going to happen in 2023. That's my prediction for 2023. Every day, somebody else is going to wake up. I had a friend of mine who I ran into, I used to hang out and drink brews with years ago, back in my younger days, right? Ran into him the other day at this local seafood restaurant. And I said, what's happening? He says, man, I watch your channel all the time. I said, really? He says, you're good, man. You're good. I like it. I didn't even know this guy was into politics. But guess what? He's waking up. I'm not saying I'm good or bad. I'm saying I'm not having a different conversation than Jimmy Dore or the Duran or I or Earl Grey or whoever. You may agree with some things I say. You may disagree with some things. But this is a conversation of dissent, a conversation, an intellectual conversation that says we're going to try to figure things out using empirical data and information and history and intuition and all the things, not just these fake and phony so-called facts that they give us that are nothing but a bunch of lies. And more people are waking up. We can be happy. We can be proud for 2022 and even prouder for 2023. My prediction is more people will wake up. This is the no sheep zone. You know, I should get that. I should get a hat with, like, you know, the little circle and the line across of it and sheep, and call this the no sheep zone. That's what this is, the no sheep zone. The NSZ. There we go. So let's continue. So that's one side, right? The collapsing U.S. empire. The rats are jumping off the sinking ship. The rich people are splitting their money amongst each other. The people like us are waking up saying, "You lying bastards. We've had enough, and we're going to do whatever we can to push back and to enlighten more people and to wake up more people." Right? That's what we're doing as a community. You're not just a person in the chat room. You're a part of a community that's making changes. That's critical. That's important. And I want to thank you for it. But now let's look at the other side. The collapsing empire versus who? Who are they up against? Let me show you something. Let me show you something. Africa News. Look, this guy, he says, Russia and China, we love you, Russia, China. Well, they don't speak, a lot of times they don't speak English, so he doesn't have it spelled right because, you know, they're speaking another language. But look, boom, these are the people. Why are protesters in Ethiopia and Mali waving Russian flags? Right? Let's look at this. We'll search this together. Flags. R-O-T. Protest. What do you know? Oh, there we go. Look at this. Things are moving kind of slow, but you'll see it in a second. If it pops up, the people in Haiti, why are Haitian protesters waving Russian flags? More and more Haitians are demonstrating in the street waving Russian flags. Photos of President Putin signals that read, "Please for military help from Moscow." This trend conveys the discourse of a frustrated people. Right now, I'm not going to keep going, but I could go on and on and on. There are people around the world who are in poor countries, poor Black people, brown people, saying, hey, Russia, China, let's look at who's on the other side. Let's start here and see why. And because it's not just about race. Let's look at who's on the other side. So you got a collapsing empire on one side. On the other side, there was a term they used to use for Africa and South America and parts of Asia, right? The third world. Not even the second world. They said we were first world. There was no part of the area of the world that they referred to as the second world. They just said we're first world countries and they're third world countries. In other words, they're so far down, we don't even have a number above them. We're first, they're third. Who's second? There is no second. They don't even get second. We push them down to third. Nobody in second place. They're third place. How can you be in third place when you don't even have a second? But that's the disdain that was shown for these poor countries. And if you know your history, they ain't accidentally poor. These are countries that have the most natural resources of any countries in the world. In Africa, South America, they got lithium, they got gold, they got uranium. That's their problem. So what happened? The first world countries robbed the hell out of the third world countries. Their stuff was stolen, their countries were overthrown, their leaders were killed by the US empire and the UK time and time again. I could go country after country after country, right? And they remember this. Then they changed it because guess what? Here's the thing, and you know what it is in the liberal world. The liberal world has to reword everything. So they went from third world countries to developing nations. Developing implies that they're getting better. And it also implies in a way you can start arguing, yes, these countries who are impoverished because we treat them like hell and robbed the poor bastards for 500 years. Actually, they're improving, and we're the ones that are improving them. It was all lies. It was lies that they just happened to be poor. It was lies that we were improving them, but they came up with something new, kind of like they saw your arm off and call you, alternatively abled or something. No, they cut your foot off and call you mobility challenged, right? That was the thing, right? They add a new name for these people developing, but let's utilize that because it wasn't a lie. Because somewhere in there, little did they know, there was a seed. It was a seed of truth, a seed of reality, a seed of hope, a seed of determination. So what do you get? You get Russia and China, right? You get Iran. You get countries who have potential, lots and lots of potential, and who are really too big and strong to be held back by the United States. They had a lot of resources. They got a lot of time. They got a lot, right? Number one. But number two, the U.S. didn't see it coming. The U.S. just thought we'd take advantage of everybody, China, Russia, Iran, whoever the hell, right? Well, the Iranians threw the U.S. 79, and Americans are still bad. The Americans overthrew the government of Iran. Look at that book, All the Shah's Men. I got it somewhere here. The U.S. overthrew the government of Iran, took the Iranian oil and divvied it up. We get 40%. UK, you get 20%. You get 20%. Stole their oil and divvied up the proceeds for their oil, installed a dictator, which the Iranians overthrew in 1979. And then the U.S. said, how dare them? Those evil people, they did a terrible thing. They had an Iranian revolution. We overthrew their government and installed a dictator. They had a duty to revolt, in my opinion. The Iranians had a duty, had a right to revolt against the U.S. installed dictator, as any country should and would and did in that instance, right? They start growing. They got oil, they got gas, they got people, brilliant scientists in Iran, right? So now what do you have? You got Russia and China. Well, they just like, Russia's nothing. Who cares? They're Slavs. They're below us, the Americans, right? The Anglo-Saxons. They'll never figure things out. Yeah, well, that didn't work out real well. Same with the Chinese. So the U.S. then look at the Chinese and they see this gigantic labor market. And they're like, holy crap. We're paying Americans a decent salary. Why don't we just move all of this stuff over to China? We'll use the cheap labor and we'll make more money. And then China was like, okay, fine. What we would like is, we don't want your technology. We want the science behind your technology. The US, see, people are like, they stole our technology. No, they didn't. First of all, any technology that the Chinese got, we gave it to them. We're like, hey, we want to build iPhones. You build the factory. Here's all the technology we use to build the iPhone, build it. And they said, we want the science behind it. Okay, here's the science behind it. And they said, okay, now we'll build our own stuff. And there comes Huawei, a better, I don't know how much you know, if you're in any country, if you've ever been in any country with Huawei, if it was in the United States, it would blow out Apple and it would blow out Samsung. Why? Because it's just as good and it's half the price. It's half the price. So the US is like, whoa, hey, all this free market stuff ain't working so well because they're building something better in the free market. The government better the government better come into the market, because the government should never interfere in the market except now, right? The hypocrisy of that. So what happens? China grows. Russia, and a country where the people have a great culture and history and pride, and of course from the Soviet Union. What did they have in Russia? What did they have in Russia as a result of the Soviet Union? If you hang around the people, the Russian people, older people from the Soviet Union, there's one thing you'll find out that they had. You know what that was? Education. They were all well educated. So when the Soviet Union fell, it fell politically, but it still had a gigantic reservoir of people that were very well educated. And people who are well educated, who have knowledge, can make it. They can't take your knowledge from you. So what the Russians were able to do? Look at what they're doing. Hypersonic missiles, S-400s, all kinds of things that are better than the West. Why? Because we're screwing our people education-wise here. Instead of educating the Americans here, they're taking money. They're putting the kids in college, and when the kids get out of college, they got $200,000, $100,000, $250,000 in debt, right? Nope. They got all these educated people. Their economy quickly wakes up, starts to rise. They're able to get great military technology. They're able to sell things around the world. Russia grows very quickly. Why? Because they had a lot of educated people from the Soviet Union. I don't care what you think about the Soviet Union, good, bad, that's irrelevant. That's a reality. They had a bunch of well-educated people. I know a lot of Russians. I've studied Russian for years. In fact, you know, my mentor, my political mentor, was Paul Robeson Jr. for years. He went to school in the Soviet Union. He was born, you know, he lived there for years, right? As a child. He knows it well. And we discussed that. And that's something that, you know, the Soviet Union, whatever they did, good, bad, or indifferent, their people got educated. And if you're around a bunch of Russians right now, you'll see these people are well-educated people. Okay, especially the older ones and what have you, very well educated. So they didn't have the financial things that they needed. They didn't have the physical things that they had. Well, they had plenty of natural resources, but they had an educated workforce and an educated population, and they were able to utilize that to grow. So what happens now? Russia, Iran, China, they blossom. And the U.S. empire wakes up one day and says, oh, whoa, how did this happen? These people are getting too big for their britches. Now, they recognized that the U.S. was a problem for them, that the U.S. was going to push back on this. Now, they build allies. Here's the other part. The U.S., the history of U.S. and European colonialism is to abuse what they call the third world countries, to rob them blind and overthrow their countries, right? Russia and China, just culturally, they're different. They don't have that history. You know, I once had a guy, I never thought about this, but I once had a guy that I was interviewing, right? You may remember, I'll tell you who it was. A while back, the FBI attacked and raided this group called the Uhuru movement. And it was they are the African Socialist Party, right? In America. They got a right to do that. That is their constitutional right, to be the African Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement. And they did things like they collected money. They ran somebody for mayor. The guy got like 1.6% of the vote. You got a right to do that. We got a constitution that says if you want to do that, you can do it. You win, lose, or whatever, right? They built like a basketball court in the poor Black community. And they open like a fresh vegetable store or something in a poor black community, stuff like that. Come on. I mean, what are these guys out here trying to overthrow the government? No, the FBI raids them, does all kind of stuff. And there was a guy that ran this group called Omali Yashitali. They called him the chairman Omali, right? When the FBI raided them, I said, hey, I got to get this guy on and interview him and ask him what the hell this is about on my Los Angeles. So I brought him on and I said, he was talking about different things or whatever, told me all about what happened, what the FBI did and all that. The guy's 80 years old. They threw like flashbang grenades. Boom. Remember Roger Stone? Who I've interviewed Roger Stone. Yeah, man, ideologically, Roger Stone and I are on opposite sides of the corner, but he's a human being. You know what I mean? And he has his rights, and I support his rights. The guy's not, Roger Stone's not young. I think his wife has some, is she deaf or something? I think his wife has some physical disabilities, whatever. Same thing. He's unarmed. The FBI threw flash grenade, a SWAT team came in and grabbed this guy like he's, the second coming of bin Laden. Well, they did the same thing with poor 80-year-old Omali Yashitali, unarmed. Helicopters, SWAT guys all over the place. So I interviewed this guy and he's talking about different things. And he said this, I never forgot. He said, well, Garland, he says, let me tell you something. He says, one thing you'll never find. I said, what's that? He says, go all over America. You'll never find a black person with a Chinese or Russian last name. And I said, really? He said, yes, because your last names are the people that nabbed you and brought you to slavery, right? So the bottom line is this. And I never thought about it. Sometimes people say things. I'm like, yeah, I never thought about that. It makes sense. But the bottom line is this, you'll never find like a guy named Tyrone Chang. No, it ain't going to happen. Not happening, right? It's Jefferson. I think Thomas Jefferson was the last white person in America with the last name was Jefferson, right? And George Washington, I think that was it. They must have had a hell of a lot of kids. But my point being, he said that to me, and that is applicable here. And here's why. Because the countries in the so-called third world have a historical context. And the historical context does not involve Russia or China coming to their country, overthrowing them, beating the hell out of them constantly. So what happened? So they're the developing world. Russia and China were the developing world, but for some of the reasons that I gave you, they're big and huge and they develop faster, right? And so they developed. You're a little teeny country in Central Africa, you're kind of screwed. You've been mistreated for I don't know how what. China had what they call the century of humiliation. Okay. So what's going on? All of these countries that have been degraded, humiliated, and robbed. Middle East. The U.S. empire thought the Middle East was, we got the Middle East. No, the Middle East was like, no way, you Yankee bastards, you screwed us. The lines, the countries in the Middle East were drawn by who? The UK. They forgot. Same with the Indians, the people in India, the U.S. was like, we know India will be on our side. And India's like, yeah, we kind of remember all those famines in the late 1800s, you sons of bitches. The answer is no. We're going with the Russians and Chinese. Get out of here with that, right? So what do we have? We now have the developing nations all coming together. And this is what it looks like. Let's finalize who's versus who. On one side, you have, in this conflict, you have the ruling elite class, the reverse Robin Hood class, right? The wealthy thieves, oligarchs, criminals, that the Epstein Island crew, right? They're there. They're one side, and they're doing everything they can to suppress the voices of people like us in their society, who wants to let everybody know you're being had, you're being took, hoodwinked, bamboozled, misled, and led astray, right? So you've got a corrupt, a ruling elite in the U.S. empire who are doing everything they can to drag their people along with them into this conflict, knowing that if their people find out the truth, they're screwed. On the other side, you have the developing nations, which now are starting to develop, because in the same way that China and Russia and Iran were able to develop and rise, even despite a lot of pushback from the U.S., they're like, we're going to do business with Cuba. We're going to do business with Venezuela. We're going to do business with Syria. They're Africa and what have you. And the Africans and the people in the Middle East and the Muslim nations and the people in South America and the people all throughout Asia are like, yeah, this is where we are. I mean, think about this. The U.S. is saying to these Asian countries, we want to join it, right? They're saying to Cambodia, they're saying to Vietnam, they're saying to Indonesia, right? What do these countries have in common? The U.S. wants all of those countries to join them in a crusade against China. Vietnam, 2.5 million Vietnamese, a genocide by the United States. Cambodia, 800,000 Cambodians in a bombing campaign. As Henry Kissinger said, anything that flies on anything that moves. They slaughtered mercilessly by the hundreds of thousands, just peasant rights farmers, just because they were there. Right? Indonesia, read a book called The Jakarta Method. They overthrow the government. They install a brutal dictator, and then anybody who's considered left or Marxist or communist or Leninist or socialist or anything, I've heard numbers up to 4 million people, from 400,000 to 4 million people. Genocide. Right. So the U.S. is going to countries that they've literally committed genocide against, saying, hey, will you join me to go against China? And I wonder why those countries are like, you better get the hell out of here, Yankee. And they're going to the Indians. Oh, gee, I wonder why the Indians don't want to go along with the UK. Can't imagine. Same thing. Genocides. The things that, if you count the numbers, Hitler is a pipsqueak besides what the U.S. and the UK and the colonial powers have done in Africa, in, think about the France, slaughtering 10,000 people at one clip, right? In Asia, in South America, look up the El Mosote massacre, on and on and on, on and on. So the reality is that these countries are looking at the U.S. saying, we don't want any parts of that. We had 500 years of that bull crap, and it didn't work for us. So we have established clearly on one side of the aisle, on one side of this conflict, you got the ruling elite of the U.S. empire that's dragging that are both collapsing this empire by their actions and dragging the people of a collapsed empire along with them into a conflict that the people don't want. And they're fighting right now with their people in a censorship war. On the other side, you have, I would say this, Russia, China, India, Iran, countries that have been able to rise above U.S. imperialism, I'll use that term, around U.S. oppression, and they've risen and they've become very powerful, and they are leading a coalition of nations, most, if not, at least many of which, if not most of which, have been victims of U.S. or European colonialism. That's the two sides. That's the two sides. So keep in mind, remember what I said. I didn't say the U.S. and the U.S. empire, because it's not. It is the corrupt Epstein Island flying to, changing the name of everything, word, lying, criminal, warmongering sociopaths of the oligarch ruling elite class. That's who is pushing this thing. And what they're doing, because they see what's happening. They see that they're losing their power. They see that people are getting wise to them, and they feel like they're desperate and they're just doing whatever they can. Now, people ask about what the ultimate question is. Andre Martinyov talked about. The only question is, will we be all croak in a nuclear war? I'm with Andre. Andre says, well, anything could happen. Don't get me wrong. Look, that croak in a nuclear war, I could be talking right now and just go thump, right? A lot of people have been dropping dead of heart attacks. I think I'm okay myself, but yeah, a lot of people have been just suddenly dropping off. So that could happen to anybody. Some have a little better chance than others for any number of reasons. But a car accident, God knows I've been in enough of them. So there ain't no guarantee that I ain't going to die in any way, shape, or form, much less in a nuclear holocaust. But I'm with Andre. I always say this. People say, what do you think? I said, there's a reason that they're chicken. None of them ever joined the military. I was an ex-cop, which is quasi-military. None of them would ever be police officers. But Victoria Nuland, Blinken, those freaking chicken-hearted cowards. No, they're afraid. That's why they got to send somebody else into a military conflict. They're afraid. They do not want to get involved in a nuclear war. They're scared to death of any kind of war. I doubt it. It could, theoretically, anything could happen, but I'm with Andre in that only question. I don't think that these people will push the button. Don't believe it for a second. But, and they'll do what they do, right? They will change the name of something. Well, you lost a war. Huh? Lost is a word that we probably need to make an adjustment to. We'll call this that we that they'll rename it. Like if people used to words. Like there used to be a time when a person had a some kind of a, let's say they had their leg got cut off from the knee down in a tragic accident, and there was a time when it was perfectly normal to say, well, that poor person is crippled. My friend, my brother, my father, he's crippled. He had his leg cut off. And then that turned to they're handicapped. And now it's alternatively abled. They just reword things. It's the same thing. The poor guy doesn't have a leg. We should, a society, in my opinion, a wealthy society, any society should take care of people who can't take care of themselves, like some poor sucker that got their leg cut off in a tragic train accident, right? But they just simply reword it. That's what they'll do. They'll lose. Hey, you guys lost. Lost. I wouldn't say lost. I'd say we won and then they'll go into their explanation, and then they'll come up with a new new word for lost, but it'll mean that they won. But it'll be about teaching the American people that losing is winning. But the problem they're going to have too is, let me add this. It's what I said in the first place. Here's the problem. Here's why one side is stronger than the other. I'll go on a little bit longer since it's what the hell. We got time today, time's going on. Believe it or not, I like to tell you, I did a lot of things in my life. And one of the things that I did when I was first started with the American Civil Liberties Union, I used to be on the board, right? In Maryland, the national board, and I was on the national board. I left. It's a whole nother story. I resigned in protest, shall we say. But one of the things, this is kind of interesting. I didn't know anything about the Open Society Institute. I didn't know anything about Soros. So I was on the board of directors. This was in the 90s for the Maryland Board of Directors for the American Civil Liberties Union. And they said, hey, Garland, would you like to go to some kind of a training? I said, yes. And it was the something leaderships program, right? And what they trained you, and it was expensive, but it was the Open Society. It was Soros's people. I didn't know. I just said, okay, wait. And actually, believe it or not, it was good training. And what they taught was how to run a nonprofit organization. Now, little did I know that a big part of that, sure, they're good for nonprofit organizations to help the homeless or whatever. They're going to give money to that. But there's also going to be some nonprofit organizations that end up in another country trying to overthrow the country, right? But at any rate, what they taught was this: how to run successfully, run as executive director a nonprofit organization, and how to advocate for whatever that nonprofit, for the homeless, if it's for the poor, old, young, whatever, how to advocate for your cause. The main thing that they taught, first and foremost, was building coalitions. Your strength is in coalitions. And that's very sensible. Like I said, to this day, I'll tell you, it was good training. I could tell you some more stuff about Open Society Institute, my dealings with them. I had some that, was pretty crappy. I learned about, maybe I will, but we'll continue. What do you want to do? You want to build coalitions, strength in numbers. So you're a coalition for the homeless, right? And you want to stand up for, raise money, whatever you want to do to help the homeless. You find other coalitions. What are you? We're an environmental coalition. What are you? We're for this. We're for that. You bring all of these other nonprofit organizations together, and you say, I will support your Save the Whales, whatever the hell, if you'll support my homeless, and I'll support yours, Save the Snails, whatever the hell, right? You build coalition, right? Okay, so what's happening? The reason I bring that is Russia and China are launching a very successful diplomatic war. Keep in mind, this war, it's World War III, no question about that, but it's fought in different ways. It's fought online, technology, right? Using censorship and bots and all that kind of stuff. The infamous info war, that's part of World War III. It's fought economically, sanctions, things of that nature. But the Russians and the Chinese are very effective at building diplomatically, right? So what they've done is they built coalitions. From the very beginning, what was going on before and during this war? Sergei Lavrov and his people were circling around the world. Man, they were in Africa. They were in the Middle East. They're meeting with the Arab League. They're meeting with the Chinese. They're meeting with anybody they could to build a coalition. Hey, what do you need? We got a lot of gas. We can give you a good price. Hey, we'll take it. Good enough. You're on board, right? They built a powerful coalition, and that coalition is expanding because they're able, the Chinese are on board. Why? They're able to improve your circumstances. They're able to say to your country, look, you guys ain't got much. Why? You've been screwed over by the Yankees. Yeah, we have, Biden and his team and whoever the hell, Obama and all of them, Bush, Trump, they've been screwing us for years. Okay, we can give you a good price. We can build you some roads, how about some wheat? You want wheat? Here's wheat. Right? They built a coalition. They had something to offer. But a lot of those countries, as they're being developed, they got a lot of natural resources that are very valuable to Russia and China that they can trade. Plus, a lot of these countries, do you know what continent has the most countries with sanctions on the earth, with U.S. sanctions? Africa. The most sanctioned continent of the world. What a shock, right? So Russia and China can go to Africa and say, you're sanctioned, we can help you out. They can go to South America. Well, you're sanctions, aren't you? We got your back. Guess what happens? Those countries are now on board. So they build their coalition. So the coalition of the willing, the real coalition of the willing, on the side of the developing countries, you've got a growing coalition. This coalition's growing. And Russia and China is building their coalition. On the other side, what's happening? You got Olaf Scholz. You got some of the Europeans starting to say to the Americans, hey, you're stealing our industry. Now, don't get me wrong. They're complicit. They're nothing but viceroys but they got to say something because the people are in the streets. So you've got a growing coalition of developing nations on one side. On the other side, you've got a group of corrupt Epstein Island hanging out on oligarchs who are dividing up the money as they prey on their own people. That ain't a growing coalition, my friend. That is a shrinking coalition. You've got a growing coalition of the developing world versus a shrinking coalition of the collapsing empire. How do you think this is going to turn out? I think if you put it all together that way, it speaks for itself. Thanks a lot, you all. Let's now, and everybody who's celebrating, have a happy day. Let's start looking and answering some questions on the super chats. Oh man, we got 150. Wow, we got lots of people. And thanks to everybody. I appreciate it. Whoever can do super chats. It's the end of the year. Hey, great time to do that. Thanks a lot. Let's go to the super chats. And we got lots of people over there on Rockfin, and we'll keep going. Yeah, well, my buddy, sometimes my buddy's texting me as he watches this, and I look down and he's like, hey man, expand on the part about the strippers. Yeah, I can imagine, knowing him, he'd want to hear that. Let's go. Happy New Year's. Keep up your good work. Thank you, Tartanya Kononov or whatever. Look, I'll put it like this. Here's one difference. I was in my 20s and we were all consenting adults. I was grown. They were grown. Come on, right? Unlike the ruling elite where 20 is, maybe about 10 years too old for them, okay? Let's see. Felix Lopez says something or other. Oh, Happy New Year. Thank you. Thank you, Felix Lopez. Let's go. Keep going. We got some. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats today. Feliz Año Nuevo, Garland. Thanks a lot, Eric Suarva. I wish I could speak Spanish because I knew what that means. Okay. Joe Kastner says, mindset or not, it's hard to not see myself as a slave. I work to live, to provide for my family. My boss gets richer while I just survive. No choice. Here's what I think, though. And this is why I say you're not a slave, Joe. Because you're here. Because you're having that discussion. You see, a slave has their head down. A slave feels like a slave. A slave is not questioning it. They're just accepting it, right? I think that's part of being a slave. A slave mentality is to accept it. The fact that you're here, that you're having a conversation, the fact that you're willing to push back, the fact that you're willing to go to alternative media. I would say this, Joe, I don't think you're a slave, man. Not in your mind, not in your mentality. I think people like you, Joe, and the rest of the people here and all of our friends here are the people that are going to change things. We are the people that will make a difference if a difference can be made. And I believe a difference can be made. Look, the world changes. The world doesn't stay the same, over the course of years. It's going to change. And there's people like us that'll change it. John McCarthy, Uhuru movement says they expect indictment sometime in January. Visit handsoffuhuru.org to find out how to help. There we go. We'll stand up. I don't know if they will indict them because they got nothing on them and a lot of people. So we'll see. We'll see. Well, I'll put it like this. Thanks. Handsoffuhuru.org. I will be interviewing the people. I will be, there. What's interesting? Let me say this. there's a lot of people that have been saying for many years, man, the FBI is bad news. Look up COINTELPRO. Look up J. Edgar Hoover. They've been doing dirt for years. The FBI is the U.S.'s secret police. That's what they are. And soon as they went after the Uhuru movement, I was right there to say that's wrong. These people got a constitutional right to do whatever the hell they want. And if they want to be the African Socialist Party and they want to build basketball courts for the poor, you know what they went after them for? There was an anti-imperialist organization in Russia, and it was it was pushing back against the U.S. empire. It was an individual who ran it. They went there and they met with the people and they went to a conference and they came back. That was their crime. That was their crime. They're hanging out and associating with an anti-imperialist organization in Moscow. But this is not new, because throughout history, the Native American or the Black organizations that said, hey, we feel like we're being treated wrong and we want some fairness, were for many, many years, they called them Russian and Soviet fronts. So anybody in the U.S. empire that tried to stand up and say, I don't think this is fair, they call you some kind of a Russian bot. Thanks a lot. This is not new. We're continuing to go. In the 90s, Russia changed its education system to be more compatible with the West. This year, they changed it back. Interesting. Yep. Righty. Let's see what we got next. Thanks a lot, Obi. Oh, OB1. I guess the last name's Kenobi, maybe? I'm guessing. The Force is with you, Luke. All right. BHL says, thanks, Garland. Love you, brother. Thank you too, BHL. I wonder why the L is separate from the B and the H. Raphael Lagonde, and Uncle Tom was a good guy too. He gave his life to allow the escapees to reach freedom. It was 2 field slaves who told the master. That's the way it all was. Yeah, Uncle Tom. Yeah, people use that term. It actually means something in modern discussion. It means a Black person who turns on Black people and treats them wrong. But in the original Uncle Tom's Cabin, you were right. Uncle Tom was a hero. Joseph Curry, thanks a lot, Joseph Curry. But I thanks everyone for the super chats. I love you, Garland. Wisdom and humor in one package. The favorite stepdad everyone wished for. Thanks a lot, Lee Gian. Oh man, we got lots of people with something to say. Leonard Kolichov, thanks a lot, Lynn. Appreciate the end of the year. We got Sergey says, Happy New Year, Garland. Your is one of the few voices of sanity out there. Thank you very much for what you're doing. All the best in 2023. I try. Let's hope the CIA doesn't get their mitts on me before the end of the year. I got a couple hours. Hey, Sparky, what's happening? Love Sparky. Sparky's always at the Durant. Sparky's all over the place. So Sparky's one of my favorite. Office on K Street, Garland. Please tell us you're not one of them. Really? No. I'll put it like this: you don't have to tell them, Sparky. You don't have to guess. Noah name, climate change, pouring rain. It's keeping me and my dog inside today. Thanks for sharing your time with us. You're waking up blind. That's what we're doing. We're trying to wake up the sheep, man. We're trying to wake up the stinking sheep. Let's go. Tabernac says, it will be clear to future historians that the maiden grift was the greatest strategic mistake of our era. America is powerful enough to handle any combination of problems, but the Chinese economy with Russian cover fire is worse than a slow death, HNY. Everything that's happening to the U.S. is self-inflicted wounds. Sam, Happy New Year's to all. See, the bottom line is this. You got to allow the world. Let me say this before I go to the next person. The U.S. is in a war with modernity. Here's the bottom line. It's just like you got a little brother, right? You have somebody that pushes their little brother around, and they wake up one day and they're 16 and their little brother is 3 inches taller and weighs 40 pounds more. Ain't no pushing around that little brother anymore. You shouldn't have been pushing around when he was smaller, but now you ain't pushing him around. That was the U.S. They were pushing around Russia and China and Iran, and now they wake up and Russia's got all kind of missiles and they're making money, and China's making money, and they can't push them around anymore. That's what it is. All right, let's keep going. Thanks a lot. Oh, by the way, thanks a lot, Raphael. GDNPB. Wow, that's a lot of it. A great acronym, whatever it is. Thanks a lot. And we're going to go to the bottom and see. Joe Kastner, thanks, Garland. Happy New Year. I think that is that it. Thanks a lot, Andre Gang. Wow, everybody's really out there today. Tatiana Kononov, I'm guessing. I ain't so great with the Russian names. How about that? All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Let's check out All right, we're going to check out Rockfin now. Are we ready? Zach says, you always lend an uplifting voice, spreading hope. Thank you, Garland, and Happy New Year. Thanks a lot, Zach. Jake Sadiq says, great mind, much love. Thank you. Let's see who next. TD says, we live in a world in which we need to share responsibility. It's easy to say it's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem, but there are those who see the need and respond. I consider those people my heroes. Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. Thank you, Garland and Scott Ritter. Thanks a lot. I'm with you. I'm a big believer in that. I don't believe in just selfish me. I believe that, it's, as I said, the stories I told you about these young girls. Okay, but how many of these young girls, and they get out of turn 18, they're no longer in foster care, they're on the street, and now they're strippers and they're prostitutes. Well, how many of them aren't? How many of them don't have that beauty or that or whatever? A lot of them are in jail. A lot of them die of drug overdoses. It's horrible, and we got the money to do it, but we don't fix it. Robin Stowe, Gone, you're one of my favorite commentators. Your analogies are pristine. Thanks a lot, Robin. Robin, you're one of my favorite people too. We got more people. Happy New Year, Garland, from Robin Stowe. Thank you. You're appreciated and loved. Yay, Robin. Tamara says, Happy New Year, Garland, from Russia with love. Tamara, thanks a lot. And I really wish I could pronounce your last name, but let's try it. Geisleichter or Geisleichter. So we will continue. Thanks a lot, you all. Certainly really appreciate that. And we're going to go back to the bottom. Let's look at a couple people that didn't do super chats. Joe Montana. Wow. Joe Montana. The Joe Montana? Garland, do you think the EU citizens know their leaders are just puppets of the US? I think some of them are waking up. I think more and more of them are waking up. That's what I think. So we'll see. Let's continue. If Alexander Mercouris is the Oracle of London, Garland is the Oracle of DC, or just a guy with a big mouth who used to date strippers. I really do believe we can retrain the chump tards attacking our capital. What's a chump tard who's attacking our capital? I don't know, guys, but thanks a lot for whatever. All right. Climate change, LOL. You do know that the climate is changing on the other planets is our solar system. You know, I'm not sure about the wording of that, so I don't understand it. The memory hole is a fairly, it is. The memory hole is a fairly decent channel, although I've seen a lot of their videos elsewhere. Memory hole is a really good channel. They show a lot of old stuff about the CIA and intelligence community and stuff like that. A lot of good history. Memory hole is a good channel. Basically, U.S. Americans hate freedom and liberty in the free markets. I don't know about that. Big G Haywood says, the idiots in pajamas, the greatest threat to democracy. FBI and Antifa operatives attacked the Capitol. Well, I'll put it to you like this. The FBI, you're right. The whole idea of Antifa operatives. Here's what I think. Let me comment on that. I'm glad you said Antifa operatives. I watch the mainstream media when I do to find out what they want us to think. That's what I do. I watch to find out what they want to think. So let me comment on this because I never say one thing without saying the other. Let me comment on this Antifa Proud Boys thing, right? So that was part of a game. It was part of a mind game, and this was it. If you turn on Fox News, Antifa was out to get you. It's Antifa. Oh my God, they're legion. There's a billion of them. There's trillions of them. They're everywhere. There are Antifa meetings on every corner. Run from Antifa. They're going to kill you if you're a conservative. Meanwhile, you could go right over to NBC. Who should I be afraid of? The Proud Boys. Why, those Proud Boys are everywhere. They're lurking behind every rock is a Proud Boy waiting to cut your throat and eat you, right? It was a fraud. Don't get caught up in that. The people that are out to do us in, it ain't Antifa and it ain't the Proud Boys. The people that are out to do us in are on Wall Street. They're on Capitol Hill. They're in Palo Alto, California. They're in where my aunt used to live. They're in Silicon Valley. Do not be misled into being afraid of people who are in your economic class. If they're in our economic, they're normal, maybe not. Maybe they, I mean, a lot of them are students and stuff like that. And they ain't making that much money. They may not be those of us who are middle class or are making it or not making it, whatever, right? some kind of way. When I say they're in our economic class, they're not billionaires, okay? So the idea that I got to be scared of Antifa or the Proud Boys is nothing but a mind operation to take in my opinion, to take my focus off the people that are robbing me blind. Are Antifa and the Proud Boys trying to lead us into war against Russia and China and destroy our economy? Are the Antifa and the Proud Boys online trying to censor us so that we can't get out what we have to say and that we can't have a discussion? Are Antifa and the Proud Boys blowing up the economy over and over again and then getting $15 and $20 billion per company bailouts? Was Antifa and the Proud Boys bailed out? I understand what you're saying, but I think that, in my opinion, when you say, yes, Antifa did this, or if you're a so-called Democrat, it's the Proud Boys that you're being took. That those are the conversations that waste all of our times. And I understand why that you may say that, you may believe it. The FBI, come on. Everybody, if you've been paying attention to the FBI, you know, if there's a riot, a protest going on, in the same way that as soon as you see a protest in Iran, as soon as I saw a protest in Iran, I'm like, U.S. intelligence involved with that. Protest in China, Hong Kong, we know the U.S. intelligence is involved. If there's a protest, Kazakhstan, Belarus, you know the CIA is involved. If there's a country that we don't, and they're going to show it 24 hours a day. Now, protest in Paris, that you would never even see it, right? So the game is, if there's a protest in here, it's the same thing. If there's a protest in the U.S., guess what? The FBI is all over it. They're helping plan it. They got people at the top involved of whatever organization or group. I guarantee you the Charlottesville thing the other day, FBI was all over it. They didn't try to stop it, that Charlottesville thing a few years ago, because they were helping plan it. There was probably a couple of FBI bees out there chanting with the people in Charlottesville, right? So my point is this. Antifa, the Proud Boys, all of those, they're riddled with spooks. They're riddled with spooks. And at the top, there's probably spooks like, hey, let's go out here and confront some Proud Boys while they're scumbags. Grab some sticks. We're confronting the Proud Boys. Meanwhile, at Proud Boys headquarters, you know, you're like, let's go to the Proud Boys headquarters. But there is such a thing. And you walk in the door. How you doing? There's like a bunch of FBI agents sitting around and informants. Yeah, we got to go out tomorrow and confront Antifa. You know what you got with Antifa versus the Proud Boys? The FBI versus the FBI. That's what the way I see it. Hey, what do you got? Hey, well, Ray Epps. So often, more often than not, it's a false dichotomy, right? The Proud Boys or the Antifa, the FBI-led, spook-led Proud Boys, or the FBI spook-led Antifa. That's what I believe. I guarantee you, they're riddled. And you know what? The January 6th thing, which was, let's face it, it's a fraud. It's not what they, let's face it, they like opened the door. Literally, the Capitol Police like opened the door. They're like, hey, we're out here and we're angry. All right this way, guys. Move these velvet ropes along and open the door. Let's take some selfies. Snap, snap, snap. Have a nice day. Would you like some drinks? Literally, some of the people involved said, hey, where's so-and-so's office? Oh, yeah. The cops were like, yeah, down there a little bit to the left. You want to make a right? Go this way, down the stairs. If you need to go to the bathrooms are this way. Anybody need any drinks? We're passing out waters. Waters for anybody? You got to stay hydrated. You know what I mean, guys? Stay hydrated. That's what they're doing. And meanwhile, there was more FBI agents in that crowd than there are in the frickin' Hoover building. So anytime I hear somebody say Antifa or FBI or Antifa or whichever of these organizations, they're riddled with FBI spooks. I'm sorry if you think that they're genuine threat to you. They are, only in that they're led by the FBI. That's all I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to throw out there. What was that? The Jennifer Granholm, where they were supposedly going to kidnap the Michigan, riddled with spooks at the top. The group, so-called militia, they might as well have wore FBI uniforms. There were so many people at the top of that militia who were FBI informants. It's like 12 FBI informants and one guy who wasn't. Yeah, let's go kidnap somebody. And afterwards, we'll meet back at FBI headquarters for coffee like we do every other evening. Don't forget, guys, the FBI bowling team's Thursday at 6 p.m. It's a local bowling alley, right? So don't be bamboozled into these small organizations that seem to be, that you're told by the mainstream media are a threat to you. It's a lie. They're led by spooks. They're dragged around by spooks. If they're not led, they're incited. The spooks come in. Hey guys, you should come to this town and do something. We don't have any money. Oh really? We just happen to have a sack of loot right here. There you go. Money for everybody. Free flights in. You need a hotel? Here's a card. Just put it on the FBI. Bring all your people. Stay here. Yeah, we don't want to cause any trouble. That's okay. We'll train you how to do that. We'll give you all baseball bats. There will be pallets of bricks spread around the building, around the perimeter of the protest. Feel free to grab some and throw them as you feel necessary. Come on, let's be honest. Who is there? Anybody sitting there who's watching this saying, "Well, Garland's wrong. I don't know what he's talking about. The FBI is never involved in these things." I don't think so. Everybody I know that is watching this is like, "Yeah, I think you're right, brother." Even the guy, God bless him, who said FBI and Antifa, I guarantee you when he thinks about it, he's like, no, I could have just said FBI and FBI. FBI and FBI, oh, they were there. Yes, sir. So get rid of that. It's all of those organizations, whatever they are, they're kind of, a lot of them are kind of goofy people. But really, if you know the Antifas or the Proud Boys and stuff like that, a lot of them are people who got self-esteem issues and they want to be part of a group, and they get part of a group and then they follow the leader who's a member of the FBI, and they go to some protest and they stand around and yell at each other, and then the mainstream media comes in as instructed by the FBI and film it and tell you should be scared as hell. And instead, meanwhile, you're doing that, and there's a bunch of freaking Nazis from the Azov battalion marching along in Congress, Sieg Heiling, and goose stepping and doing all the things that don't be scared of the people who are in the capital of the United States, covered with swastika tattoos, screaming Sieg Heil and goose stepping. No, those are not the guys you want to be scared of. You want to be scared of some friggin' sophomore from Stanford who's a member of the of an FBI-led, the local FBI-led Antifa group or something, which has 14 people in it. I'm sorry, I ain't scared of those people. I understand it for what it is. How about we just go with that? Let's see what anybody else says. Ask yourself why the IRS needed millions of rounds of ammo. Exactly. Exactly. It's all a fraud. Let me ask you this, because when it talks about that money, does anybody, I mean, in millions of rounds of ammo, they probably didn't even buy millions of rounds of ammo. It's money laundering. Does anybody really believe this? This is what they used to say in America, and this was the game. The Pentagon spending $500 for a hammer. It's all of this waste. They're wasting money. But they ain't spending $500 for ammo. Here's the thing. If you're going to peel money off and use it on things that you're not allowed to peel it off for, if you're going to use it for shiesty, crooked things, if you're going to fill your stinking, filthy pockets full of stolen loot, you buy a hammer for $5 and you write down how much you pay for that hammer. Add another zero, 500. The other $495 is going in my pocket. The other $495 is going with me and my criminal elite criminals. So oftentimes, when you see the government saying we spent X amount of money on that, and it seems like a lot, and it's like, what you spend on sunglasses? $400 million. How many pairs of sunglasses did you buy? 4. And people are like, oh my God, waste, fraud, and abuse. Oh, they spent $100 million per sunglasses. Ha ha. You've been had. You bought into the criminal operation. You're in fact part of it. When you push that they actually spent $100 million for 4 pairs of sunglasses, $400 million, and you're saying waste, fraud, and abuse. It ain't waste, fraud, and abuse, my friend. It's criminality. It is theft. It is embezzlement is what it really is. They're taking money and they're robbing it. Let me show you something since we got a little bit of time. Watch this. $12 billion missing Iraq. Let me give an example. You want to see something? Let me show you exactly what I mean, my dear and fluffy friends. Watch this. We're going a little bit. It's it's a holiday. We're going a little extra long. Look at this. Let me show you a perfect example of how you're being had. How the US sent $12 billion in cash and watched it to Iraq and watched it vanish. Special flights brought in tons of banknotes, which disappeared into the war zone. Disappeared, my friends. Huh? $12 billion in cash. Disappeared. Let's go on. The US flew nearly $12 billion in shrink-wrapped $100 bills into Iraq, then distributed the cash with no proper control over who was receiving it and how it was being spent. The staggering scale of the biggest transfer of cash in the history of the Federal Reserve has been graphically laid bare by a US congressional committee. In the year after the invasion in Iraq, nearly 281 million notes weighing 363 tons were sent from New York to Baghdad for disbursement to Iraqi ministries and U.S. contractors using C-130 planes, blah, 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 blah. What is that article saying? 363 tons of money, shrink-wrapped, $12 billion in cash. How many tractor-trailer loads of money did they have? A bunch. And it just disappeared. They don't know what happened to it. Why would you send $12 billion in cash anywhere? Because it was disappeared. That's bullcrap. They didn't disappear. That's a lie. That's how you launder $12 billion worth of money. That's how you give it to your friends. That's how you buy things that you don't want people to know you bought. That's how you put it in. Back then they didn't have crypto, but the Ukraine's FTX crypto scan. That's how you do it. It's a scam. 12 billion in cash in Iraq. But but if you look at it, if you follow that, you know what you find? If you keep following the trail of that, you find that it was actually 53 billion that came up missing. 53 billion plus that 12 billion that came up missing. They don't know what happened to it. You're a fool if you think they don't know. Watch this. Let me show you. It's part of another part of the scam you may not have seen. Libya Sovereign Fund, MISSING. BBC. August. Look at this. This ain't Antifa or the Proud Boys, my friends. Libyan Sovereign Wealth Fund missing $2.9 billion. Some $2.9 billion is missing from the accounts of the Libyan Sovereign Wealth Fund, the official task with tracking down Libya's foreign investments, was told. Mahmoud Baye said investigations found misappropriation, misuse, misconduct of the funds at the Libyan Investing Authority, which was in London. The LIA total funds, and here's the reality, was worth about $70 billion. We are going to dig for the truth. We need the help of expert people. We will use expert people. It wasn't 3 billion that was missing. It was the whole 70 billion, my friend. The whole 70 billion. See what I'm talking about? It's a scam. It's a scam. And I love to do this. Let me show you another one. Here's another one. Let me show you. It's all a scam, my friends. It's all a scam. Here's another one. Let's look at this. Ukraine crypto donations in focus as FTX collapses. FTX's partnership with the Ukrainian government comes into spotlight, right? It has drawn attention for its partnership with the Ukrainian government, a partnership that has since spawned many conspiracy theories. So we're sending $100 billion over to Ukraine, right? And what do the Ukrainians do? Hey, there's a war going on. Hey, what do you think there, Vladimir? Do you think we should get tanks, airplanes, or shells? Just throwing this out there. Might be a good time to invest in crypto. I hear Bitcoin's on fire, man. Think about that. A war. We're told this is an existential war for the people of Ukraine. We must stand up for democracy versus authoritarianism. We must send them this money now. Here's $130 billion from Ukraine. And those bastards were sticking it in crypto. And some of it's coming right back into the hands of the Democratic Party. And the Republicans probably getting some too. They're all in on a scam. Don't fool yourself. But my point being this, it's a fraud. It's a scam. The whole money thing is a scam. It's a scam. The money's missing. They overthrew Libya. What happened to the 70 billion in their sovereign fund? Is see ya into the hands of the same oligarchs. Hey, I'm just wondering. Ukraine, where's all that money going? Crypto? Really? Think about that. And what happened? 2 days, 2 to 3 days before FTX collapsed, the Ukrainian government started scraping, scouring all of their websites and getting rid of anything that would relate them to FTX. In other words, the government of Ukraine knew it was coming, and they were told, hey, man, clean up, clean your stuff up. When people find this out, they're going to be hip. They're going to be on to us. You wonder where all that money's going? How easy is it to, you get some crypto, right? You buy Ethereum, you sell that. You go Bitcoin, you sell that. Dogecoin, whatever. You buy, you sell, you buy, you sell, and boom, right out the back door with all that money. Nobody ever knows where it went. It's a scam. The whole thing's a scam. So, that's the reality of this thing. The reality of it is this. And this is what I'm trying to get to people. Thanks to, and I appreciate everybody here, that the person that mentioned Antifa lately, if you are being directed to your enemies, and your enemies is not the elite ruling class oligarchs, if their name ain't on if their name is somehow, if their name or one of their business partners is not on the Epstein Island list to fly back and forth there, right? The manifest for Epstein's planes. If they ain't somewhere around that list, you'll probably be a bit ahead. If it's a bunch of schmucks running around with black suits on, we are Antifa. No. If it's a bunch of Proud Boys, I don't know how much you know about. Do you really know about the Proud Boys? Here's the truth about the Proud Boys. It is like a clandestinely gay conservative organization. Look it up. I know about the Proud Boys. I know people who know people about it. It is a kind of clandestinely gay. Not that I care, as they always say, not that I care. Hey, it's none of my business. Let them live their lives, live and be lived, whatever. That's a conversation I don't want to have, right? All I'm saying is this. It's just like a clandestinely gay organization that runs around and makes friggin' idiots of themselves as their opponents are Antifa, who dress in black and make idiots of themselves. And little do both sides know that the people running them are like all FBI agents, that they're just a spook-led fraud. Really, to me, it's a fraud. Both of them are fraud or shell organizations because they're run by FBI. There's spook money, spooks from one end of both of those organizations to the other. So I'm not had by them. Good luck to you. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'm getting tired. You're getting tired. We're all getting tired. And I want to thank everybody. So I will end by saying that. Did we miss anybody? Tamara. We got Tamara. Did we miss anybody else over here? Happy New Year. Rick C. Hey, thanks, Rick. Timothy Taylor. Thank you, Timothy. Zach. Thanks a lot, Zach. Zach says you always had an uplifting voice. Oh, we already got Zach. Did we miss anybody else on Super Chats? If we did, I want to make sure we did that. And I am kind of tired and ready to roll. Okay. India says, amazing show, Garland. Alexander. Okay. And you're the Oracle of DC. You always... Your shows are so rich. Happy New Year. Thanks a lot. I did just a little extra and had a little fun and yapped for a while today because what the hell, Shadowless Kick. Thanks a lot, Shadowless Kick. That's pretty cool. Happy New Year's, Garland, to everyone on the chat and watching this video. Thanks a lot. It's Jeremy M. Anyone else that we missed? How about we say... Yep, Joe, we're there. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. I will end by saying this. Wow, 1,190 people. What did it? Wow, 1 hour and 37 minutes. No wonder I'm tired and my mouth is all dry. Let me say this. Thank you, everybody. For anybody watching this, number one, Happy New Year to everyone. And if you can, please share this and share any and all my videos on all your social media platforms. For those who can, there's certainly options to help keep the channel going. Certainly buymeacoffee.com/Garland in with an H on the end for some damn reason. I don't know why, but it got Buy Me a Coffee. It's great. Cash App, you can do that. You see my information there. And Patreon, $1, $3, $5, $1 million a month, whatever you can afford, right? Rockfin.com. Look, you know good and well as I do that they could throw me off YouTube on any minute and they want to. So please go to Rockfin, ROKFIN, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon, and perfectly free. You have to pay no money whatsoever to be a member there, and you see all my stuff. And Rockfin does not have any advertisements. It's great. Now, let me say this. How does Rockfin stay on the air with subscribers? Those who can afford become a subscriber. It's like $15, $14.99 a month. But if you sign up for a year, you get 2 free months. So it comes up to $10 a month, right? So if you can do it, you sign up for a year, it's $9.99 a month or whatever, right? So if you can do that, Rockfin is great. It is a great platform. A lot of good stuff on there. And the fact everybody, Jimmy Dore, Alexander Mercourse, everybody's on there. And the thing is, what we all do, all Rockfin creators do at least one premium show per month, and per week. The premium show is for the subscribers, and I do mine every Wednesday from 9 to 10 a.m. with Scott Ritter. I do the first 15 or 20 minutes on, in fact, all of my platforms, so people can see that, and then the rest of it is on Rockfin. So that's for premium. That's my one premium show per week. What am I talking about? Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. So if you can afford that, if you can afford it, only if you can afford it, please become a member. Help keep Rockfin a free speech platform that does no advertisements. Keep rockfin.com on the air. I would appreciate that. Rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. If you can't, don't worry about it. Just become a free member and share everything on all your social media platforms. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody. Follow me. I'm back on Twitter. Of course, they let me back on. So follow me on Twitter. Follow me Telegram, everywhere else. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day. Happy New Year's. Let me see any more super chats. If I miss super chats, I want to make sure that I get nope. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Peace. I'm out.